Hey guys, it's Courtne Marland here, and in this video we're going to talk about specifically why your SaaS is not growing and then also how to fix it. Now, I want to give you a sort of outline for this video so you can sort of see what we're going to cover. And the reason I'm doing that is to make sure that you stay to the end, because I promise you this will massively result in explosive growth for your SaaS. That's coming not just from my experience with my own SaaS companies, but also from the hundreds of clients that we've rolled this process out for and got some incredible results. And I'm literally going to give you everything that you need. And I'm also going to show you some real life examples of this being implemented. And I'll also show you the numbers behind it. This is a real life funnel with exactly what I'm about to cover. And you can see the amount of traffic that we're getting. Every couple of hours, someone's hitting this page and we're converting. And this is also with the zero spend on marketing at the moment, which I think is even more impressive. Right, but anyways, in this video, we're going to sort of cover like the problem. So obviously, if you're watching this, it's because you want your SaaS to grow faster. So the first thing is, why is it not growing? And I think that the problem is what I call the invisible pipeline. Then after that, I'm going to sort of help you understand your pipeline. I'm going to talk about the steps that you should notice in a pipeline, as well as the different types of leads. We're going to quickly talk about whales versus long tail leads in the pipeline. And then I'm sort of going to show you, after I've showed you the problem, I'm going to show you the solution to your problem, which is how to make the invisible visible, and give you some tools and then a practical sort of guide theory on setting it up. And then again, I practice what I preach. So I'm going to show you the practical implementation of this, right? Literally step by step. And then we'll show you some examples and things. Right, so let's jump into it. First things first is this is a truism in sales and marketing that you literally cannot escape. Doesn't matter who you learn from or what you know. This is one thing that is always true and it's not going to change. The fate of your business depends on how quickly you can turn qualified leads, both qualified leads which are on your website or the ones that are in your product, if you think about free trials and stuff, into paying customers. And the faster you make the sale, the faster your business grows. I know you're probably thinking, Courtne, this is like grade 2 level. This is like so simple. I knew that. I didn't need to watch a video on it. But trust me, that is like the underpinning thing here, because a lot of people, they understand that, but they don't internalize it. And if you actually look at your business, you might understand this, but you're not implementing it. Okay. So once we understand that, therefore we can say that growth, and obviously the side effect of growth would be revenue, is simply just a function of a pipeline made up of two components. And the two components is getting people into the pipeline, so generating that, and we call that origination, and then converting those leads into customers, and we call that conversion. Again, super simple, I know, but just remember those two things, origination and conversion. Those are the two things that you can affect that change the pipeline. You can also change like the value of the leads in the pipeline and all these things, but those are much smaller levers. The two big levers you can pull when it comes to sales and growth for SaaS is origination and conversion, okay? And it's very likely that you right now are ignoring 98% of your actual pipeline. And if you ignore 98% of your pipeline, you're obviously massively reducing origination. So if these are the two biggest levers you can pull, I guarantee you most of you are not even touching this origination part, right? And it's a huge problem. And that's simply because you can't see them, okay? That's why I call them invisible. We call this the invisible pipeline. Now, the goal with this video, frankly put, is just to simply help you reduce that percentage from 98 down to something more acceptable. You're never going to get it to zero, but we can maybe look at like a 20 to 30%, which is still a massive jump. That's all I want to achieve in this video, and I want to show you exactly how to do that. Okay. So in order to understand how to do that, first I just want to cover some basics with the pipeline. There's really two realizations I want to help you get to, and if you already know this, just recap it. The first thing is just looking at the pipeline from a bird's eye overview and understanding the different steps that happen in a pipeline and how you can sort of apply that. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way. So by all means, if you notice something, please go ahead and implement it. And then also I'm going to sort of talk about the different types of leads, and then I'll wrap that into why I call this the invisible pipeline. Okay, so the first step in a pipeline is essentially the acquire step. Now, this is essentially the process of turning prospects into leads, okay? And very often I see marketing and salespeople get confused because they sort of use this word prospect and leads interchangeably as if it's the same thing, and it's not. The reason there's two words is because they actually are completely different parts of the sales process. A prospect is someone that you don't know anything about them yet, right? So maybe you have a name and an email. That is a prospect. Or maybe you don't have a name and email, you just have pixels, right? Because it's just an anonymous person visiting your website that they found out from some way, right? Maybe they found you on social media, maybe they found you in ads, doesn't matter, but they're anonymous, right? That is a prospect. The moment you get qualifying information on them, and again, for every company, for every SaaS, if you're in B2B, you should have set up your qualifying criteria. That's a completely different topic I can make a video about, but you should have qualifying criteria, and that depends on your offer, the ticket price, etc. But once you get the information for the qualifying criteria, they are now a lead. Then when they are a lead, they can be separated into unqualified leads and qualified leads, right? But that is a lead. The difference between a prospect and a lead is essentially capturing their name and email and qualifying criteria. Okay, so essentially this part of the funnel is how do we get qualifying criteria and how do we get those names and emails. Okay, and that's sort of the main thing that we're going to touch on here, because once you have their name and email, they are essentially visible, right? Name and email, now you can set a sales team on them like a pack of wolves, right? You can say, hey, sales team, this is this person, this is their email, go chase them down and qualify them and try and sell to them, right? You now can see them, they exist somewhere. But when they're just randomly browsing your website, they're invisible. And that's the main thing that we're going to focus on. But if we just continue through the sales cycle, the next step would be obviously the qualification. So remember how I said they're a lead? The next thing is to turn them into a qualified lead or an unqualified lead. And that is essentially the process of just gathering information from the leads and deciding if they are worth pursuing or not pursuing, okay? And properly qualifying these leads is the difference between closing a lot of deals or wasting a lot of energy. And since sales is the most expensive department in the business, minimizing waste here is a very worthwhile endeavor. I often see very early stage founders or very solo founders think that this is not a big deal. They seem to think that the idea is just speak to all of these people, and they completely undervalue their time, right? Because essentially your time is free because it's not like you have to pay yourself. That doesn't mean you can just give it away, because usually you can deploy your time into something else, maybe running ads or building new features for your product or something that will give you much higher payoff than talking to people who are never going to buy simply because they're not qualified. And if you put a sales rep in there, sales reps, obviously they're earning commission, and they also need to be really good. So they're usually the most expensive resource to hire for. So it's very expensive if you don't get this right. So how do I think you should define this, and what is our recommendation? The first thing is you start with your ICP, your ideal client profile. So basically your avatar. Who do you want to sell to? Are they male, female? Are they old, young? What industry are they in, etc.? And then what you do is you develop a scoring system. So a scoring system is like, for example, let's say I only sell to companies that have 10 people or more, right? If they say that they have 8 people, then maybe I'll give them a plus 0.8. If they say they have 12 people, I'll give them a plus 1.2. If they say they have 1 people, I'll give them a plus 0.1, right? So you can see how depending on their answers, it gives you different scores. And obviously you would have a couple of questions. And then what you want to do is define a minimum threshold. So a minimum threshold being if they don't reach a score above this number, we don't even go and speak to them. Okay. So the reason why I like doing it this way is because this is very like math orientated. Essentially you take their answers, you put it in a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet spits out a number, and then it's a simple, if the number is bigger than this, do this. If it's not, then do this. So there is no thinking, right? What you don't want to do is leave it what I call sort of up in the air. A lot of companies that I've consulted with, the way that they do this is they essentially get the lead information and then they get the sales rep to read the application and decide if they're qualified or not. And to me, that's an enormous amount of brain power, thinking and reading applications, and it slows down everything. And I've sort of taken the approach that you want your reps selling, not thinking. The maximum amount that you can automate their day will always result in much higher returns. Okay? And the next thing is like, what information do you collect for this scoring thing? We recommend generally just collecting the name, the email, their phone number, because then you can do triage calling, their website, because if you have their website, you can pull their website traffic, you can go and have a look at it, you can look at their product, etc., and the company size. And usually because company size is a financial qualification, a lot of qualifying in the sales process is done by essentially asking what is the revenue of the business. I found that's a very hard question to get answers for. People don't like revealing their revenue, etc. But when someone gives you the size of their company, which people freely give that information out, it sort of reveals the revenue, right? Because a company that has 10 people versus 1 person, obviously the revenue is massively different. So this is a qualifying question in terms of finance. This is a qualifying question in terms of product market fit, stage of the company, etc. And then this is obviously used to actually do the selling. That's sort of my thought process behind it. And that way we're only asking for 5 things versus asking like a long list of many things. And that leads me to my next point. If in doubt, leave it out. So every additional question that you add to your qualifying adds friction. And the more friction there is, the less people are going to move through it. Your conversion rate is going to be significantly lower. Okay, so that's why I like this. It's just 5 short questions and it usually gives me everything I need anyways. Okay, now the next thing that I sort of want to give you some advice when you do this is give context. Okay, a lot of the time I've seen sales reps or even SDRs fire questions at leads, right? And they're basically like, how many people are in your company? What's the website? How much money did you make last quarter? Blah, blah, blah. They just fire questions and they don't explain to the prospect why those questions are being asked. And what ends up happening then is, first of all, the prospect has a lot of resistance against giving the answers, first of all. Secondly, they just rush through it and they don't really think through, so you don't get high quality answers. And third, the drop-off rate is significantly higher. It's much better to create context around it. For example, you can say, what is the company size? The reason I ask is because we know that most of our clients with a company size of X, they usually end up on this plan. And if they're above a certain number, then they end up on this plan. And so by asking this, I can sort of cater this demo to the plan that's best suited for you. So just by creating that context, you sort of help the lead understand why they're giving up information. Okay, that dramatically helps conversion. We've seen that many, many times. Where possible, leverage AI and automation as much as possible here. I am not a fan of using AI for B2B sales when it comes to like direct sales rep to customer interaction, because I think a lot of people are put off on it. However, I think for qualification, it's very, very useful because it should be very math-based, and it's essentially collecting information, filtering it, and then deciding what to do. And that takes a lot of human time, and AI is just as good at it, if not even better, right? So I think this is a very valuable component to introduce AI into. The next thing is team members here should be paid on output volume. So for the different stages in the pipeline, the way that you associate costs in your business is different. And again, I know I'm giving you like loads of information. I promise just like stick with me to the end of this video and I'll wrap it all up. But I need to explain these concepts so that you can understand sort of the plan that we're going to implement. But coming down to cost, because whenever I try and set up a system like this, I'm always thinking about, okay, what is the cost of doing these things? And does it make sense to do this? Because in a business, there's a lot of things you can do, right? And some of them work, some of them don't. But some of them work, but the cost of doing them is way more than the extra revenue it generates anyway. So yes, it's working, it's generating revenue, but the cost is too high. So it doesn't really matter, right? And that's why I think about cost. So the way you think about cost in the acquire stage is you want to have human cost to be almost zero, right? That's why I didn't put any point here. There should not be a human involved here. This is either automation, which is the system I'm going to show you now, or it should be like paid ads, right? Which is also really good. It's just obviously expensive. With steps 2 and 3, you need humans, but the way you pay the humans changes. So for step 2, I pay based on output volume, right? So essentially what I'm doing is I'm paying per qualified lead. So an STR will go through all the inbound traffic and obviously qualify them and move them through the conversations. And then if they are qualified, we'll obviously book in a demo call, and I'm paying them on demo call book, right? For the conversion page, I'll talk about this just now, but for the conversion step, the team members here, I'm paying them on cash commission. So they're only getting paid a percentage of the cash that they close. And the reason why I've done this separation is because it's unfair that this role is tied to commission because they're not actually doing sales. And it also incentivizes the wrong thing, because here you're trying to incentivize volume to feed step 3. And step 3, you're trying to incentivize conversion, right? Because it's like the final step. Okay, so that's just a point on costs, which will make sense when we get to why this step is so crucial. Let's just talk about this. At this stage, we recommend taking a consultative seller approach. Okay, so there's sort of 2 schools of thought in SaaS that I've sort of seen when it comes to step 3. The first step is essentially to have a cookie cutter demo. So basically what happens is you come up with a way to demo your product, all of its features, etc., and you come up with a sales script and maybe even some slides, and you train your team essentially to just say the same thing on every single call, repetitiveness. And the argument for this is, essentially, if you have a perfect formula, you don't want it to be changed. You just want the same thing every single time, because then you have predictability and reliability, right? And that does work. A lot of companies do use it. I just don't like it. I think a better approach and a more human approach, because you have a human here anyway, so you might as well use them, is to act as more of a consultative seller. So what a consultative seller does is basically chats to the client, really figures out their needs, and then customizes the essential presentation to them. Right. And again, the steps in doing this is essentially you identify the problems by chatting to them. Then you educate them on the solution to their problems. And then once you educate them on their solution, you position your product as the bridge between the gap. So again, this is something that I think comes down to like product market fit. And this is like a completely different rabbit hole. But the way that I explain this very easily is if you think about a CRM, right? Most companies buy CRMs. Now, the problem, if you're identifying the problem when you're trying to sell someone a CRM, is, hey, storing information for all of these people across all these meetings and setting tasks to like remind yourself on when to phone them, whatever, that's super, super hard. That's a really difficult problem. Now, the solution is essentially you take notes and you have like a task list, and you can do that on paper. Like literally, I always have a book with some notes here. I could literally replace a CRM with a notebook. I could take all my notes down here. I could create like a list of tasks, whatever. The problem is like that's very inefficient, and there's a lot of problems with that, and it doesn't scale. Therefore, we build a product, right? A SaaS product, a CRM, and we position that essentially to be a replacement for the notebook. Okay, so we're positioning it as a bridge between the gap between the problem and the solution. But first, they need to know what the problem and solution is. Okay, and then after that, you maximize LTV, because now you've done this this positioning properly, and this is also why I like this, you can maximize the LTV by pushing penetration. So usually, let's take the CRM approach. It would only be rolled out to the salespeople. But now because you're doing the consultative selling, you can say, hey, another problem is that marketing is very disconnected from sales. They don't really understand what's going on. And so what if we get your marketing team in the CRM as well? That way they can see the notes of the sales reps and they can see what's going on, and therefore they can do a better job at marketing. Now that sounds amazing, right? And again, because you built up that trust, you can do that. So what you've done is now you've potentially taken a deal that would have been maybe 3 seats, just the sales reps, to now 5 seats because you've added in the marketing people, and the marketing people are going to use the product way less, which means the cost to deliver will be lower, but you're still charging the same amount. So the deal just got exponentially bigger, and you cannot do that if you're doing a cookie cutter approach. You only allow room for things like that if you're doing consultative selling. Okay, so that's what I prefer here. All right, now customized demos always outperform, and if set up correctly, require very minimal effort. Okay, so the pushback that I get on this is this sounds like a lot of work customizing it, and it's not, because essentially what you would do is you would create a deck, and then you would allow 10 to 15 minutes before each sales call to customize the deck. There's a whole process of doing that. I'm not going to get into it, but it's not that big of a deal, right? Customizing it is actually relatively easy, and it's also actually pretty repetitive because most people have the same problems, okay? And then I already spoke about that. All right, so that is the pipeline, understanding the stages that happen. Now let's talk about the people that go through that pipeline. So if you think of an actual pipe, that was the pipeline. Now we're talking about the water flowing through it, because you get different stages of the pipeline. Now you get different types of water flowing through the pipeline. And I believe that there's 3 types. The first is inbound. So these are usually owned by your marketing team. And these would come from things like content, SEO, paid ads, social media, etc. These leads are usually very, very easy to close. They're very nurtured, they're very warmed up, they really trust you, like you, etc. Very easy to sell to, and they're usually low churn as well, which means high value, right? Great. Now, outbound. This is owned by your sales team, okay? So this would be done through like cold email, or they were done through like events where you send your salespeople to events and they collect names, etc. Cold calling, all of that sits in the outbound. Now, the third one is invisible leads. So these are people who are visiting your website or they are researching you. And where did they come from? It can depend, right? It can depend that maybe they came from some form of SEO, maybe they came from a referral, maybe they found you on a comparison site like G2 or Courtne or one of these others. The source of this doesn't actually matter. The difference is they are aware of you and they are browsing in your ecosystem, but you don't know who they are. They're just anonymous. Because with inbound, you know who they are. Because it's owned by your marketing team, there's usually some form of lead capture form, right? Like if I think about running ads, I'm going to send traffic to a page, and on that page, there'll be some form of opt-in. Now I know who they are. Even if I don't know their name and their email, I know who they are in a Facebook audience or a Google audience, so I can retarget them. So I have a way of getting to them, right? And the same thing with content, because content would be social media. So they might be following me. So I don't know their name and email specifically, but I have a way of getting to them. Where these guys, they're just there. I'm 99% of the time not aware of who they are and I have no idea how to get to them. Okay. So they can't be emailed or targeted. And for most companies, it's a majority of their website traffic. Like most of their website traffic is completely anonymous. Okay. And so in summary, a large portion of your website visitors who might buy your product simply aren't finding their way to a contact form or a demo request. Most people, when they come to your website, they aren't filling out forms or booking a demo, but they're still super, super, super valuable, okay? And then we get into the whales versus the long tail. So those are the leads. Within the leads, let's go one step deeper, because then you get different types of inbound, different types of outbound, and different types of invisible leads. And there's really only 2 types, right? There's whales and there's long tail, okay? And again, I just want to recap because I know there's a lot of information going on here. So we have the funnel, and I've broken down the 3 stages of the funnel. Then within the funnel, you have water coming in. And the water can be thought of as 3 different types of waters: inbound water, outbound water, and invisible leads. All right. And then obviously the filter is filtering out the water, right? Then within each type of water, you have, let's call it droplets. I'm getting really creative here with my analogies. You'll have different droplets within the water. And those different droplets are either whales or long tail customers. So whales, these are your big clients, right? These are very large, very complex accounts. And here you want to optimize for thoroughness, not speed. Okay, so this is ideally manual from start to finish. They're very large opportunities. There's usually multiple stakeholders, very long sales cycle, lots of sales calls, etc. Okay, so those are your big whales. The next thing is your long tail sales. So your long tail leads are made up of your small little accounts. These are small companies, and small companies are often a lot more agile, and therefore they don't take as long to purchase, but obviously the value of them is a lot less. And here we want to leverage automation and only introduce a manual action where absolutely necessary. So here, smaller opportunity size, single a few stakeholders, very quick, very transactional sales cycle. Now, let's take all that theory and translate it into something that's actually useful and actually something that we can implement. Okay, so how to make the invisible visible. So in a typical sales team, everyone's focus is usually on the pipeline. Like if you run a sales team, 99% of the time, your day always starts with a pipeline review, which is just looking at the pipeline and saying, okay, why are these deals not moving? What is the forecast, etc. Right? That's most of their focus is spent on the pipeline. And it definitely should be. Again, I don't want to tell teams not to do that because your pipeline is like the most important element in your business. You should still focus on it. However, you need to also get your sales team comfortable with the idea of real-time sales, which is when they are finished with their pipeline stuff, right? Because usually they'll finish with it and they'll have free time. That free time should be used to proactively reach out to guests on your site and move them to off-the-cuff demos. So for example, someone's browsing the website and you ping them immediately like, hey, I don't know who you are, but I can see that you're browsing, probably trying to figure out if we're a good fit for you or not, and if you're going to use us and maybe comparing us to a competitor or whatever it is. That's a lot of work. Why don't we just chat about it and I can answer all your questions right now in the next 5 minutes. Does that sound good? The person gets on the call and straight away you have a demo, right? Immediately off the cuff. And you can just do that throughout your day, right? Again, I'm alluding to what the system is. I'm going to show you the full system. But that's in element what we're about to build here. So in order to do something like that, there's really two tools that you need. The first thing is you need an enrichment tool, right? Because you need a way to convert these anonymous people into accounts. Okay, and so the one that I recommend is Clearbit. The two tools I'm going to recommend here are Clearbit and Intercom. But there's a lot of competitors to them. This is just the two that we use and the two that I like, but I've seen success with a lot of other things. So don't look at it as tool agnostic. It's more, what are we trying to do here, big picture. Right, so why do we need to convert IP addresses into names and emails? It comes back to these things that I was explaining earlier. So first of all, we are converting anonymous people into names and emails. And we're using Clearbit to do that, which means we don't have a human doing it. We have an automatic software doing it, which is our acquire stage. So we've done what we wanted. We've now passed stage one, and we've done that with a software instead of a human, which means we don't have that much cost associated with it. So good, we're good to go there, right? Now we're moving to stage two. Stage two is qualifying, right? Now, in order to qualify, as I mentioned, we need to speak to them and get answers to our qualifying questions. All right. And then from the qualifying questions, what we're going to do is we're going to identify them as either being whales or being long tail accounts. And then what we're going to do is we're going to decide on effort. Because let's say you have a sales team of 3 people, but you have on average 40 people on your website at any given time. So it isn't possible for your team to attack all of them with the same amount of effort. So we need to segment the traffic on there by whales or long tail, and then obviously assign effort disproportionately. And that's why we have those qualifying questions so that we can decide if they're a whale versus long tail. So now we understand what we're doing. Now we need to actually get that information from them so we can decide. And in order to do that, we need a tool that allows us to reach out to them in real time with context, right? I'm actually going to add that here because I think it's super important, but with context, right? Please remember that with context. It's not enough to just say, hey, I see you browsing, let's chat. You need to answer them with context, and I'll give you examples of that. And the tool that I like using for this is Intercom. Okay. Then the next thing that people always ask me about is like, what about follow-up? And so I always say that if your lead doesn't respond to your first 2 messages, then just let automation take over. Just because they haven't got back to you doesn't mean that they aren't interested, but it's not worth a human's time trying to keep following up with them. Right? It's way better just to move on to the next one. Okay, so how would you actually think about setting this up, right? Like, what is sort of the step-by-step phases here? So the first thing is I would start with leading questions, okay? So like, hey, happy to help, because they add a little bit of value instead of just like, what communication challenges does your company face, okay? So what I mean by this is I typically see people when they set up these automations, the messages are like, hello, how are you? Let's chat. That almost never works, right? It's way more better to ask specific questions like, hey, I see you're on our communication page. What communication challenges does your company face? So again, like you're creating that context. I'm going to show you how to do that in a bit. And then really you want to target high intent pages. So placing it on landing pages that you're driving traffic to is phenomenal. And obviously for most SaaS companies, the highest intent page will be pricing. Because if someone's on your pricing page, they already understand your features, etc. They're just sort of trying to justify the price. Okay, another small little tip that I'll give you is just use real names and faces. Humans like talking to humans, right? Especially today, because I actually put it down as a note here, but especially today because there's so much AI and there's this big renaissance of AI that we're going through. People don't want to talk to a robot, right? They really want to talk to a human. And you can do that by using real names and faces. Okay, and I think that's very important and very, very underestimated in this industry. All right, so that's how I think about setting it up. I'm hoping at this point, you guys, if you've been sitting through all of this and listening to me, I appreciate you guys. I know I go on for a lot, but this is very, very important to understand. And honestly, I would tell you to rewatch this video once, twice, 3 times until you understand. And then also I gave you a lot of tips throughout this on different things that you can apply. I will make videos on all of these things in the future. But for now, it was important to get all that information out of the way. And now let's go into the fun part. Let's just talk about how you take all that and actually just do it. And then I can show you some examples. Okay. So the first thing that I think you need to do is map out your website and identify the triggers. Okay, so we have this idea that at certain points browsing to the site, we're going to ping them with a message with some context to sort of start a conversation. And then we're going to use Clearbit to sort of say, hey, Courtne, even though they didn't give me their name, we just use their IP address to backlink it. And then we're going to take them through qualifying, and then we're going to decide if it's worth our time getting on a call with them or not. So the first step there is to decide when are we going to send that message. And what I always tell people to do is actually just go ahead and map out your website. So this is an example that I did over here. So you can see that this is the different pages in our new website that's about to come out for Seeking Sigma. And then what I've done is once I've got all the pages here, I sort of decide which pages is it worth triggering a message, and what is the correct context within that to go ahead and do it. Okay, and you can look at pages, you can look at if they press certain buttons, you can also look at how much time they've spent on the site. For example, if they spent more than 5 minutes on your website, probably a good idea to ping them, that's high intent, or if they've taken certain actions, right, like sharing the link with someone or whatever. Okay, the next thing I think you should do is bucket these triggers together and then mind map the different channels that the conversation can go through. So here's an example. Let's say that someone visits our pricing page on our website. That is going to be the trigger. So someone comes to the page, we trigger our message, right? Now, after we've got the message and they reply to us, there's essentially 3 paths that the conversation can go down. The first is buyer's intent. So this is someone considering signing up and buying the software. Okay. The second one is they're an existing customer of ours. They're just looking at the pricing page because they're thinking about upgrading or downgrading. And then the third one is someone who just found us. They haven't really read too much into our features and benefits yet. So they're not ready to buy. They don't have buyer's intent, but they just have a little bit of awareness, right? So that's the third part. Now, on the buyer's intent, the next step would be, okay, they want to buy us, but what is preventing them from buying? And that would also go down different paths. The first thing is they're aware of our competitors and they're comparing us for pricing, or they want to buy, but they're confused about which plan to buy, or they're figuring out how our features actually are value for money, basically, like what value are they really going to get? Or it's someone who's very junior in their company and wants to buy the software, but needs a sign off from someone much higher, right? So they were waiting for exec sign off. Depending on that, the conversation is also going to go down different levels. So basically what you're doing is you're mapping out the layers that a conversation can go down. And from that, you can set up some automations, you can set up a script, etc. But this is how I would think about it. I didn't obviously do all of it. I just did the first path, but that's sort of how it would flow. The next thing is you're going to set up intercom. And then what you're going to do is you're going to enrich those conversations, because by default, intercom can send a message like, hey, great to see you, blah, blah, blah. But with Clearbit connected, you can say, hey, Courtne, great to see you. So you can basically add the personalization because you figure out who they are based on their IP address. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to build cross-messaging systems. So obviously Intercom is going to collect their name and their email. Once you have their name and their email, it should immediately fire cross-messaging. So they should immediately start getting emails from you. It should feed into your retargeting ads. So they start getting retargeted with ads. If you have an outbound sales team, they should immediately be calling them, trying to book demos, etc. So basically it should be integrated into your overall sales stack, if you want to call it that. Okay. And then the next thing is in terms of figuring out what to actually say in the conversations. I always tell people that whoever is leading the charge and setting this up, which should be the founder or the head of sales at the very minimum, conduct all the conversations manually. No script, just speak to them like a human until you're converting about 20% of the leads. Okay, so 2 out of every 10 conversations you convert. Once you're doing that consistently, then what I would do is work backwards and go look at your conversations. What did you say? And then convert that into a script, which you can then hand off to some SDRs. Okay. So now that we've done that, I want to show you 3 quick examples, and then I'll show you the back end of some of this working. So here's an example, and you can see Intercom is pinging, and it basically says, would you like to learn more about how we can help your company grow? Our team would be happy to give you a call, right? And then what you can see is it's giving people buttons to press. Another small little tip that I learned a long time ago is people are lazy and stupid, right? So if you take that philosophy into your marketing, It is way easier to give someone multiple choice buttons than it is to leave an empty field where they have to answer questions, right? Requires way more brain power to type a message than it does to click a button. So if possible, always try and give buttons like this that they just have to press, okay? Here's another example. Thank you for visiting our pricing page. Which plans are you interested in? The person obviously said Pro, and then the message said, awesome, can we get your details so our team can reach out to you? And then it's obviously gonna collect their name and then their email, etc., etc., and it's going to take them through the qualifying questions, right? And again, another thing is this is called, in marketing, it's called the breadcrumb technique. I forget the actual numbers, but I know a study was conducted, and basically if you show someone a whole form, they don't fill it out. But if you show someone each question at a time, they fill it out, right? Because people don't know how many questions they're filling it out, and it's like a game. It's why tools like Typeform have done very well, because it shows one question at a time. And then also what happens is you get saved responses. So maybe they don't fill out the entire form, but they fill out the first two parts, which means you have their name and their email and you can contact them. And that in itself is very, very valuable, right? So that's why with Intercom, you always send one message at a time. You don't send the whole form, okay? And then here is an example. This is actually an example from our website. Which is hopefully going to be live in the next couple of days. But you can see basically a pop-up has come up there and it's prompting them to book a demo call with us, right? So it's saying select a time, once you're booked in, shop, etc., and they can book their call directly within the chat with me. And you can see there's a picture of me, my profile picture, and you can see this happening in real life. Okay, so I hope this all made sense. Now I just want to show you us implementing this in real time. So on this channel, I've sort of been documenting the process of building one of our SaaS products, Simple Payments. And so I wanted to use that as an example. So this is the landing page that we have for this at the moment. And basically what you'll see is there's a button that says join the waitlist. Now, if you press this, immediately what happens is a conversation comes up with Intercom. A couple things there. First, you can see that it has a picture of me. So again, how we spoke about using that person and using that name. Next, it says, hey there, thanks for checking us out. Let's get you on the waiting list. And it's asking for their name. Now you can see that this has already pre-filled this. The reason it's pre-filled it is because I've already filled out this form just testing it. And so what it's done is it's picked up my IP address and it knows who I am already. So when I was filling this out, I obviously entered a random name, right? And the same thing is after that, it should now go ahead and prompt me for my email, which it has done. But you can see it has filled in my email automatically because it already knows who I am because we're using Clearbit to pick up on the IP addresses. And then it says, nice to meet you. Check your email for confirmation, all right? So you can see how this is having a conversation collecting qualifying criteria. Now, because this is a waiting list, the only qualifying criteria I need is a name and an email. But if this was a tangible sales page, I would obviously collect like how many people in your company, etc. But now I want to show you this on the back end. So this is how it looks inside Intercom on the back end, right? So you can see I have my trigger. And remember I said that you can have a variety of different triggers. I actually think it's worth maybe revisiting that because it's quite important. It was triggers. Here we go. It can be pages, it can be buttons, it can be time elapse, it can be actions, right? In this example, it's click a button, right? That's the trigger. Then you can see this is the flow that I've set up, right? So, hey, that's the message, then ask for their name. And then you see allow customer to update their existing data. So that's why for me, when it came up, it said my name and email, obviously a fake name and email, but it's allowing me to update it, okay? Then what it's doing is it's doing some things on the back end, is it's tagging the customer and it's closing the conversation, right? And then what it's doing is it's notifying me in Slack. So this is like some back-end sales stuff. For the point of this video, the key focus is here. But what I want to do is I want to show you the numbers, right, in real time. So you can see that we have a 100% engagement rate, right? So we've got 211 people here, and you can see the data flowing in consistently, right, over time. And then what Intercom does is it comes up with random names for anonymous people. So you got like pink mushroom, right? Pink mushroom, indigo teapot, like it just comes up with random names. And again, if you look at a typical sales team's pipeline, they only have names like Josh and Aaron and whoever these people are. They only have names. They don't have all these invisible ones, right? This is your invisible pipeline, right? And if you have a look at this, if I scroll, look how many of them are the invisible ones. And by not implementing what I've gone over in this video, your pipeline would not have any of these invisible names in. And now with Intercom, I can click on this and I can go message these people. So I have unlocked the ability to message the invisible pipeline that otherwise you would not see. And you can see this actually works because you have 211 engaged and 43 completed, right? So you have about a 20% conversion rate, which is what I was shooting for. And you can see in real time, this working, every couple of hours, you can see leads coming in. And if I don't want to click on them because I don't want to, this is real life data, so I don't want to give away their emails and stuff. But if you click on it, I can see their name, their email, where they were, location, I can see everything. I can message them, have a full-on conversation with them. And actually to sort of show you this in real life, if I navigate over here, you can see real life conversations coming through, right, from people. So this is the email that goes out automatically, and you can see people replying. And you can see this is just flowing in consistently, almost every single day, right? And granted, we're not even sending that much traffic to this. Okay, so that's some examples. That's some real life. If your SaaS is not growing, this is the first thing that I would implement. It massively is a massive lever in terms of driving growth. And I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.